Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing what you should be thinking about as you're preparing for your CMC audit. And today's host is Max Aulick. Max is the CEO of Ignite, and he's been working in the defense and security industry for the last 10 years, and he's also a prior Air Force veteran. So Max founded Ignite, and his team has audited thousands of organizations for both classified and unclassified audits. Today, we're going to be talking about CMC compliance and the latest news that just got released. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Max.
Awesome. Thank you, Meg. I am just going to do a brief sound check, make sure that everybody is able to hear me. Can somebody confirm that you sounds good? Okay, thank you, Brad. This is fantastic. Awesome. Okay, guys, so welcome. And again, thank you for your time. I know that you guys have seen that we are, these 48 CFR got published today. So initially, this was all about how to prepare for the audit. But what we're going to do is we are going to talk about a little bit about what just got published today. And then we're going to get right into the audit. A lot of CFOs and executives have directly reached out and said, "Hey, Max, how is this going to impact our contracts?" So we're gonna go through that. So if you're a security professional or organization moving into the DoD, you'll find this helpful. Anybody that's facing level 2 or level 3, anybody who's working with CUI, this is this is for you. There is a chat box on the side. So if you want, please ask any questions that you have. I have my assistant Meg and also Brittany. They're going to get all the questions that you have, and then they're going to consolidate the questions, and at the end we will answer every single question. We've already got some questions that have come in through an email, so we will try to answer all of those questions for you. So please use the chat feature. It's designed to get live questions in and whatnot. So here we go. We are not going to spend a lot of time on what is CMMC. Just like a quick 2 seconds. If you need to understand what it exactly is, there's other webinars. This is a little bit more advanced. Then we're going to go straight into what you need to know. Kind of bottom line up front. The rule was published today, and it was for public inspection and viewing yesterday. So spent a majority of last night looking through it. So just kind of capturing initial detail that's important. There will be more webinars covering the remaining, of what's important. Then we'll go straight into what does the audit entail? What are we looking for? There's a lot of customers on here that are that have already gone through the audit, so they have passed. And we have taken some of the lessons learned in terms of when you are not able to pass, what are some of those secrets, and how do you gently push back an auditor? Like, what's the best way to speak to an auditor so that you can get through this difficult process? So just general tips on preparation, and then of course there's a Q&A time as well. So brief introduction. As Megan mentioned, I'm one of the managing directors here. We've done lots of different audits. Today we're going to be talking about CMMC audits. And by the way, I do not look like that anymore. My team thought it would be great to put an older picture of me, so I left it. So I'm catfishing you guys a little bit. We are a FedRAMP auditor, also a 3PAO or a C3PAO, and we do a lot of other work as well. And we hold a facility clearance as well for up to TSSCI level. So just a quick primer. So if you're new to the space, everybody knows that there are 3 levels. Used to be 5, now it's 3. Most organizations are targeting level 2. Doesn't mean that's what the DoD believes. We'll talk about what they believe in terms of the new rule. But most organizations we work with, they're either targeting level 2 and level 3. Very few that we have worked with are targeting level 1. And as a basic primer, you should already be doing level 1. It's only 15 requirements. It's self-assessment. Level 2 has both components of self-assessment as well as an external assessment by a C3PAO. And then very few organizations are falling in level 3. So without further ado, let's talk about what got published, right? Kind of bottom line up front. So yesterday, the rule that everybody has been waiting on, um, it got published, right? So all of our customers and everybody says, Max, when is this gonna roll out? And finally, yesterday was the main day when it was out for public inspection. And today, you can actually Google this and find it. I think around 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. it was finally published in the Federal Register. So what does this mean? Though the rule takes effect now, you have 60 days when the government will start to take it in effect. So 60 days from now, the contracting officers and everybody on the government side, the program officers are supposed to include this thing in their contract award, right? So if you're preparing for if you're doing any type of new pursuits, new bid, I mean, typically the cycle of selling to the government is long. So 60 days is imminent, right? So that's how we kind of look at it. A lot of folks said, well, it gets published today. You don't really have to do anything. If you're talking to the government, 60 days are going to pass by very quick, and the contracting officers and the program managers are supposed to actually put what level you are within the contract starting from 60 days from now. We have some questions. So Kyle, I'm going to get back to you on this. Is there anything that could delay the rule? Man, I don't know, Kyle, but I am going to take that question as separate. There's a lot of folks that believe it could delay, but since this has been published, we don't believe that it will. But we'll talk more about that because clearly a lot of people are anticipating, like when do we actually have to do this? So there is a small business impact. I wanted to cover this because a lot of our organizations we support are really small businesses. They're not super tiny. Yes, Barbara, the deck will be available later as well as the recording. So this is the implementation rollout. So as you can see, from the 10th, 60 days from now to 1 year out, 2026, what the government is anticipating is that about 1,100 roughly of small businesses that will be impacted. And then year 2, year 3, and then year 4 is 200,000 plus. So one of the things that folks have been hearing out there is that phase 1 equals level 1. That is not true, right? Phase 1 really means that the government is expecting to do less amount of companies and then it increases. This also applies to subcontractors and things like that. So take a look at your solicitations and resulting contracts. They will tell you exactly what level you need to be at. The other thing is, if you have a commercial off the shelf, the commercial off the shelf solutions, they do not need to be going through CMMC. There's actually something called a COT determination, right? So it's not just simple as like, oh, well, I sell this thing to commercial customers. I don't have to do this. You actually have to determine if your solution is truly COTS, commercial off the shelf, or are you adding something to it, design, specifications, tolerances, or modifying the product in such a way that it's actually a government version of the product. So that's something to be aware of. So one of the things that I ask folks right now, what you should be doing is hopefully you've already submitted your self-assessment, and you should be planning. You should already be talking to an audit staff, and you should be working on pursuing the certification, right? So I think somebody asked about the DIBCAC, passed the DIBCAC 2 years ago. Michael, I think that is fantastic that you passed it 2 years ago. It's definitely going to make your CMMC journey easier. The difference between a DIBCAC audit and CMMC, DIBCAC audit is post-award. That means you already have government contracts and the government has the right to perform audits, and that's what they're doing. CMMC is pre-award. So companies that want to work with the DoD, they need to get CMMC certified. That's what the significance of this rule is that it's essentially another barrier. I'll say it very clearly. It's a barrier to entry for brand new entrants into the market. So you still will need to get certified. All right. So the next thing is around, a lot of CFOs and CEOs reached out and said, Max, I already have a contract. Do I still need to do CMMC? Does this apply to me if I already have a contract? And what about my option years and whatnot? So everything that you see here that's in quotes comes directly out of what was released today, right? So kind of the bottom line up front is that after the 60 days, if you're going through any type of uh, contract extensions or an exercise option or getting a new task order or anything like that from the government is asking if you're part of that first year rollout. If the government will determine who that is. The contracting officers and the program officers are to include CMMC certification as part of a re-up or exercising of an option period. So if you have critical contracts in place, it's not good enough to say, all right, I've already got the contract. It's good for 5 years. I won't see this thing for 5 years. If you're just hoping to only, work off of that contract for the next 5, 6 years, every time there's a re-up, they're able to mod it, and they're able to, they're able to actually um, ask you for, condition of the option period. Hey, when are you going to have your, CMMC certificate? The other thing is that the second item here, it says the contracting officer shall include the level. So again, year one rollout does not mean level one implementation, right? The CMMC level will be determined by the program office. So if the program office believes that you need to be at level one because you're only getting FCI, they will only include FCI. Some entities that we're working with that are on this call, they have already received contracts with level 2 and level 3. The contracting off, some shops are very proactive, especially if you're bidding on some of the latest Golden Dome and so other advanced projects that are high security. They are already pushing level 2 and level 3 in advance of this particular rule. All right, so we got lots of other questions, so I may not get to this. Definitely, Brittany and Megan, please collect these, and I'll try to capture a lot of these and answer it towards the end. Okay, so the other thing is this: folks have been asking, all right, what is this exact phased rollout? What if I'm a large entity? How does this impact me? So the first chart that I showed you was only the small entities, which was about 200,000 in total for level 3. These are estimates. So what happens after year one? And if you're working for a large, so this is where, if you're a subcontractor off of a large, and so let's say you're working for Booz Allen or Northrop, doesn't matter. You can see how many large entities have to get a CMMC level 2 certificate. About 37,000 of them, they have, they're estimating this. A lot of that level 2 certificate work, if it gets subcontracted out to you as a small business, you're going to see it as a flow down into your contracts, right? Because the larger businesses, they want to be in a favorable position, and they are going to want a supplier that already has a certificate, right? So sometimes there's going to be pressure directly from the government, but other times, if you're a small business and you're working with a prime or several primes, you're going to see a lot of pressure from your primes. This last sentence here, again, it's bolded and italicized. This is directly out of what was published. The government is projecting this to be an estimate. So like it said, it's likely to change based on the component or the program office discretion, right? So again, these are complete estimates provided by the government. Typically, when we see government entities perform estimations, they are way less impact than the reality. Last time we saw a cost estimate, and most folks are paying 2 to 6 times the cost of what was actually estimated by the government. As well as I would look at this in the same way. If they're saying, hey, only a 1,100 organizations need to be part of the phase 1 rollout. If I would look at that as probably plus or minus 20%, if not more, right? Especially if you're working with if your go-to-market strategy is strictly to work with primes, which are larger entities, and they are pushing down do the actual uh, the actual flow down. So, oh yeah, that's right, Dave. They don't know how to estimate costs, right? So, anyways, again, this is just a bottom line upfront for CFOs and CEOs. A lot of them have reached out and they have asked, hey, what about my current contracts, right? So, Stuart, I think you asked, should we expect program offices to do contract modifications? If the contracting officer is aware of this change, and your program officer is aware, they may opt to. The other thing is we work with a lot of organizations that receive innovation-based contracts through OTAs, other transaction authorities, or small business innovation research programs. In theory, those programs are supposed to have lighter requirements in theory. So we don't actually know how this 48 CFR is going to trickle down into, for any cyber-based programs or innovation-based OTA awards or commercial solutions offering. We don't quite understand that yet. But previously, you guys have had to enter things into DLA with enhanced verifications. So we think eventually it's going to trickle down into the cyber phase 2, phase 3, Strat 5 programs. If you have that type of funding, we think it's going to trickle down into that area as well. But FAR Part 15, full and open competition, you will start to see this for any type of award that and any type of option year that you have to exercise. So, okay. Diana asked, does this apply to DoD contracts or all agencies government wide? So far, what we know is that this applies to anything that is considered a quote unquote DoD component, right? Right now, other agencies, they're hit and miss. Department of Energy, we've got some customers that Department of Energy is asking for a SPUR score at the minimum. And if you have a joint project between, let's say, Department of Energy and the DoD, definitely. But if you're working for a state agency or CMS, we have not seen it there as much. They're just asking for, some are asking for an SPRS score, but it has not trickled its way down to all of the agencies. And we don't know if it will, right? Honestly, we don't know if it will do that. So, all right. So I think Barbara, I will definitely have to get back to you on that in terms of, if we can modify outside processors and whatnot. So please send any questions you have. We are still studying. It is a very long document, as you can imagine. It's about 30, 40 pages. So we're still kind of studying it, but bottom line up front, those are the things that you need to know in terms of what is the current impact. So you got about 60 days before you start to see this. And if you're an advanced company working on rockets, anything critical, you will start to see this immediately, because we have customers right now where the government has floated these things in advance of their contract, and they've made a condition of the contract. So depending on where you are in your sales life cycle and who you're selling to, you will start to see this either much later, or you'll start to see it much earlier, especially if you hold a facility clearance or anything like that. All right, so now let's get to the initial intent of the of this webinar. We set this up initially to help organizations prepare. There's a lot of organizations that have passed their audit, and there's some organizations that are going to be audited. So our goal is to provide you as much information transparently as possible. And then what are some of the things that the auditors typically do not disclose that you need to know, right? And so how do you prepare for it? What are some of the best practices? That is what we're going to discuss for the next 20 minutes or so. And then after that, we'll get right into the questions. So what the audit entails, right? I think somebody asked earlier, Michael, maybe he said, hey, I've already got this DIBCAC thing that happened 2 years ago, right? Again, CMMC is for pre-award. Before you work with the government, you're expected to do this at some point. And if you already have an award, the government can say, hey, we are going to do a third-party risk analysis. You're our contractor. We're going to come on site and check, right? That's the major difference between the two. In terms of what they use for their guidance, it's still the same. They're still using NIST 171, and they're still going through the 110 controls. So at the very basic level, what we are told to do as auditors is we have to identify tactics that OSC's deployed to derail the auditor. So I'll call this out. So things like long lunches, challenging the auditor, and we'll talk about how to challenge the auditor if they get off path, which some do, as well as burning too much time. So you got to remember, just like it took you a long time to prepare, as an auditor, we have to do almost twice as much work in terms of reporting. We have to report on all assessment objectives, and we have to write down sentences of what did we see, who did we talk to, what type of screenshots were shared. And we also have to document how much time we spent on each and every requirement. We have to insert this data inside of EMAS so they can calculate the cost and things like that. So as an auditor, we have to go through every single assessment method for all 110 requirements. And one of the key things that we have learned is that the organizations that are, I'll say, too chatty, they're not getting through the audit. It's supposed to be about a week to 2 weeks. Sometimes it'll take longer. It's a recipe for disaster, because that means we don't have enough content. We cannot assert your assurance and get it into EMAS in order to even, go through the whole process. So very early audits that we performed, they were supposed to be, rip the Band-Aid off quick within a 1 month time frame. They have taken 6 months or longer because the OSC is deploying tactics to derail the audit, and simply we're just trying to get to the truth and get to the completion rate, right? So that is something important to understand. We're not forming just, hey, I feel good. We do have to report on everything, all the controls, just like you do, and the test cases and the time we spent on each and every test case. So here's what we're looking for. Why would an org use delay tactics? Megan, that is a great question. A lot of times people, they realize, and we'll get to this, they realize they were not ready and they're making changes in the middle, right? And so if your SSP is not ready, if you're like, oh yeah, I've got my SOC 2 report and use that to pass the audit, they suddenly realize, hey, I need an SSP. And since we're an auditing organization, we cannot get into the middle of consultation at that point, right? So sometimes organizations want to delay it because they're completely taken by surprise. So great question. What we ask is, going through an audit is a stressful situation. It's not as stressful for the auditor, we admit, because it's just another audit for us, right? We're not on a witch hunt looking for problems. We're just trying to get through yet another audit. What we ask on the other side is stay calm and try to find ways to de-stress yourself, right? Because it is supposed to be a little bit stressful, but if you let the stress control the audit, then it becomes difficult for both parties, and we've seen that quite a bit, right? And the outcome a good auditor is supposed to be looking for is, if you've met the requirement, if you satisfied the requirement, or other than satisfied, non-compliant, and maybe partial compliance. That is the preferred way to do things, right? As auditors, we are not supposed to be going on witch hunts, right? So if you have an auditor that is extremely intrusive and unreasonable, we'll talk about how to deal with that. But what I always tell people is that when an auditor asks questions like, do you have a gun or do you have an elephant in a glove box, department? You can clarify and say, hey, what do you mean an elephant wouldn't fit in there, instead of opening it up, right? Um, so anyways, the goal of the audit is to get satisfied, compliant controls. Because if we have not met controls, and if that is the case, it does require more work on our side and things like that. And like I said, we're just trying to get through another audit, and we encourage our team members to stay calm. We've done a lot of audits where people are upset, and we're just going through the requirement with them, right? So Jacob, I will definitely answer that. It's a long question. Let's make sure we capture that. It sounds like a great a question here. So I'm going to get back to that. The other thing is this. I think Megan asked, or somebody asked, hey, why would somebody want to delay? One of the things that we have learned is when we come into an organization, if you want us to get out of there quick, and that is our preference, is to get out of there quick, make sure everything is organized. Half of the time, the information is disorganized in first 3 weeks. Instead of doing a real discovery, we are just asking where is the information and how is it organized. So this is going to be published. This gives you a general folder structure. What you'll notice is that the folder structure follows the controls layout, right? So access control, awareness and training, right? You've got your SSP, but when you have your procedures, just put them inside the folder so that we can quickly go through them. And then also you have, all of your screenshots and things like that well organized. We do need fresh information. So if you have a screenshot from like 6 months ago because you got done early, that's wonderful. It's good to keep that, but we need time stamping. So I think just having all of your information organized is one of the most beneficial things you can do to your own organization. Because if it's not organized, you're not going to be able to answer the question. And then the other thing is we are digging in massive amount of data with you, trying to find the correct answer, right? So that is a big takeaway from current audits we have done, is that just lack of organization, or you've organized it in a way that fits your operational environment, which is wonderful because we know it's happening. But we are trying to organize the information in a way so we can quickly get through this and get it into EMAS, right? So there's two different perspectives on this. Megan, great question. So, we have a product as well. There's other products out there. I think, it's not about the tool. It's more about, is the organization, is the information organized in a way that we can quickly go through it. Some tools out there, they do not organize information really well, right? And then the other tools that are out there, they do a pretty good job, or you may have to create that. So that's just something to keep in mind. Brad, yes, we provide. So in here, I'm actually going to send this out. There's a link. It says, hey, download the artifact request list. It will actually give you, it will actually give you, the artifact request list and things like that. So it's a great question because people do ask us, hey, for AC, what do you actually need? We are trying to be as transparent as possible. We strictly follow NIST 800-171 alpha guidance, and we do provide a checklist of items that you should be organizing within your folder structure. Okay, so the other question I get quite a bit is, what if the auditor is wrong? And, auditors are humans. They can be wrong. A lot of times the auditors go sideways all the time because, they feel like they're in a more powerful position. They can ask the organization anything they want. They can choose to go inside of an organization and kind of exploit it to some degree. And most people do not know how to push back the auditor without losing their cool. So I am going to demonstrate how to actually go through this cycle and how to push back the auditor. So I call it kind of the gentle pushback collaborative framework. You're not supposed to be consulting with them. So how do you collaborate with them just to make sure they don't get off the track? So typically, an auditor will go through, each and every requirement. They have to. At the very beginning, there might be some conversation around, hey, can you just tell me about your boundary? How does information flow? Just to get the context of the organization. At some point, they got to go through every single requirement, access control, awareness and training. They have to go through those, right? So it's going to feel monotonous, right? And at some certain points, there's going to be certain controls that really excite the auditor. Maybe the auditor has a background in networking, and they really love split tunneling. That's what they really love to talk about. And then you have some auditors that are more administrative and they really want to talk about physical security, right? Every auditor has their strengths and weaknesses, and the areas that they are strong in, that they love, they'll usually talk a lot more about, right? So they tend to go out of scope for those areas sometimes, potentially, or not treat other areas just as equal. So when you get a question that doesn't really tie back to a requirement, or if an auditor is just talking about, well, you got to have CUI flow, you got to have this, you got to have your third parties on also doing CUI flow, and they're just trying to understand what you're doing, you can clarify. You can say, hey, you asked me about CUI flow, you asked me about my third party. Can you help me understand which requirement does this tie to, right? Because what you're trying to redirect them towards is the requirements that they're supposed to be auditing against versus over engineering and pushing an opinion. We're not supposed to be pushing in a consultative opinion. Yes, best practices matter, but at the same time, you need to go back and say, hey, let me repeat what you said. Is this what you're asking for? And can you help me understand which requirement this ties to? What this does is gently corrects the auditor, but at the same time, it allows you to go back to your playbook. Okay, the auditor is really talking about the SC family, right? And secure communications. They're not talking about, um, an access control family. Then after that, you want to pull up your evidence. You don't want to be browsing your screen in front of the auditor. You want to pull up your evidence, and then ask them, hey, does this satisfy what you're looking for? You do want to use these words because that is what they're supposed to be looking at. They're supposed to be looking at things that satisfy and give them enough assurance in terms of, has the security been implemented? What we normally see, right? The contrast that we normally see is people open up everything. It's almost like an auditor is your friend. So I'm here to tell you, like, the auditors are not your friend. They're just there to get to the truth and get the audit done. And they just start opening up all kinds of boxes, all kinds of policies. It's almost like now we have to write more things that we saw. We have to report on the truth of what we saw, what we hear, and what you're able to demonstrate, right? So just be mindful of how you communicate. Use this cycle, clarify. If you don't understand, if it's too many convoluted things that are getting mixed up, clarify. Then show them, keep your screen very still, ask them if this satisfies what they're looking for. And then, of course, don't leave your screen on as if you're collaborating with them. Turn the screen off, get to the next question. That is very, very important, because on this side of the house, all we're doing is writing down what you're saying, what we believe to be the truth, and we're capturing a screenshot. And if you keep moving your screen in different directions, we don't actually know which screenshot to capture, and we cannot submit moving things, moving GIFs or movies into EMAS or anything like that, right? So just be aware of that in terms of, this is the framework to deploy for auditors. Now, the other thing is this. Um, the auditor can get things wrong, right? This is a new framework. We've done a lot of FedRAMP audits and CMMC STIG audits and other types of, PCI, ISO, all types of other audits, right? Every audit has a different intent and purpose and the goal that it's trying to achieve. So there's a lot of folks that are coming in from other fields, jumping into this, which is fantastic. I think it's good. We need that from a competitive perspective, so there can be better pricing in the market. But remember, your auditor is just another person with another opinion, right? And sometimes their opinions are not good or beneficial or unreasonable, I'll say, right? The other thing we've noticed is that the auditors may not have the technical chops to understand your environment. So if you look at it from my point of view, we have to deal with folks that have, um, um, you know, IoT devices that are built on Linux, Windows, Apple, Linux, all sorts of different environments. It's impossible for one person or one team to really know all of the technology, right? So you're the expert on your technology. And if they don't have the technical chops to really understand it, sometimes they tend to be a little bit more unreasonable because it's CYA. They're trying to figure out how to gather enough insurance, right? So what I always ask is, before you start, understand what the appeal process is, understand what you're able to do if there's a, if there's a unfavorable opinion. um, Kyle, the best way is go out to the website, the AB. It captures all of the approved C3PAO firms out there. So I hope nobody has signed up with somebody that is not approved. The other thing is you can ask them for an official letter from the DoD. So when we became an audit entity, we actually received a letter from the DIBCAC that says, here, you went through the process and it's signed by a team chief and everything like that. So if you don't trust the website, which sometimes websites can have misleading information, you can literally ask them, hey, can you provide us the approval letter from the government that authorized you to be an auditor, right? So those are kind of the two ways, depending on the level of assurance you're looking for. Fantastic. Okay, so here's some of the big lessons learned when you're going through an audit. Remember, an audit, you're past consulting, right? We cannot advise, but these are some of the things that we see consistently, right? We see consistently, and not in any order. So we've already kind of covered the last one, not knowing how to speak to the auditor. I'll say divulging too much information, right? And then the other is just the auditor adding a lot more opinion. If they have background in 853 or FedRAMP, sometimes they will add additional things that are not even in the requirement itself, right? So auditors can be very unreasonable, and you got to know how to get them in line with the actual scope and whatnot. The other thing is misunderstanding of CUI scope. Um, so we as auditors, we're just validating your scope, right? A lot of organizations are suffering because they don't even understand how to scope things properly. And so a lot of times they'll give us a tiny little scope, has no CUI, or a pretend boundary, right? And CUI is everywhere else. Or they'll scope in the entire enterprise when their organization is really bifurcated. They got a lot of customers that are commercial with true COTS, and then they have like 10% of their business in CUI. So just not understanding how to scope, it has been a frustrating challenge. The other is insufficient evidence, or hey, we are going to take our SOC 2 or ISO and just push that through the CMMC auditor, right? That's been quite a challenge. So that conversion process is possible, but the burden of converting and aligning is really on your organization, because there's a delta between the two. They don't equal, right? So the other thing is about lack of enforcement, right, on ESPs. This is an emerging thing. So inside of the system that where the auditors have to report in, it's called EMAS. DoD is adding brand new fields almost every week. I think 2 weeks ago they added more fields. One of the fields that they have just added is more clarity around your third parties, your ESPs. So classifying those properly, if it's an MSP or a cloud services provider, and then understanding when FedRAMP equivalency applies, as well as getting the body of evidence or customer responsibility matrix. A lot of times we see organizations that are on GCC high, they don't really know what the body of evidence is. So they've done all the right things, selected the right partners from the marketplace, but they still don't have the body of evidence. And the reason why that's important is because then you cannot document what is inherited. What are you responsible for versus what is somebody else responsible for, right? And that gets to the unorganized information side. So this is a newer kind of a fidelity that EMAS is looking for. We must understand your ESPs and what their roles are and things like that, and how they play. So I think we got I think we got a few more. So this is basically, how do you prepare, right? Um, so a lot of organizations, they want to jump straight to the audit, and we're completely okay with that. That's not a bad idea if you have a security team that is familiar with this process, right? But we recognize a lot of organizations do not, so we encourage you to start with a mock assessment. That is going to reveal a lot of information to you. So a lot of times when we are doing audits, we will ask them, hey, do you want to just do a mock assessment? Do you want to do consultation? Like, we're reluctant to sign up for audit because if you're not ready, there's no point in paying for something that you will not pass. Like, we will ask the organization to save their money if we sense that they're not really ready. The other is documentation and scoping, right? You have to control that auditor, what they see, what they don't see, and that gets down to scoping. You may have a business that is fully commercial. They don't need to go into that particular area. So it's really important that you document things very, very accurately. Brad, great question. So in what order do good CMMC auditors follow when auditing an initial 110 controls? So this is what I call the auditing key, right? The methods of verification or combination, you can ask them that. You can say up front, hey, can you, before we start an audit, can you send us what you're looking for? And we actually provide that. We will say, okay, for AC, whatever, this control, we are doing an interview and we are doing a test. So you should have, a verbal testimony on what you're going to say. And then along with that, if you're going to talk about two-factor authentication, you should show me where two-factor authentication is so I can actually take a particular screenshot, right? One of the things that after you sign up with an auditor, before you get into this, you have to enforce transparency. Like, you can tell them, I don't want any surprises in terms of what you're going to ask me. And so can you provide me with your test cases and which ones you're going to run through and what level of rigor, depth, and breadth that you're going to go through? I encourage that. Most people do not ask this question up front. We actually provide it. And when we do provide that key, they don't even know what they received. They basically received our playbook on how we're going to perform the audit. So Brad, kudos for asking that question, because I think it's really, really important to get that information up front. So which gets into my fourth point, what auditors really want to see. Again, asking for those test methods, make it very clear that you want to be very transparent, so that your current documentation, everything lines up, right? A lot of times what we're seeing is policy was approved 2 years ago, nobody checked it, and there's been massive updates on CMMC, and it's just old, right? The other thing that's really important is know who is going to speak and who is going to show, right? Right now I'm doing a webinar. I've got two people helping me, right? One person is kind of documenting the control. The other person is, sharing a different screen. It's the same thing in a stressful situation. You're going to have to do demonstration of your environment, right? So having a technical person, an engineer who is really good with the Cisco firewall or the GCC high, so they can traverse properly, that individual, the way they might function may not align with how you need to respond to the particular control. So division of labor before you get to the audit process is really important. It's really important to talk through that, because a lot of times when we get in front of an engineer, they're very open and honest, but they're going into areas that we don't need to see, right? Because I now have to annotate it. Hey, he opened up the glove box and or opened up a screen, and their policy said it was 20 characters or 15 characters, but it actually on the screen showed they only have a 6-character password. I have to write that down, right? Um, and if I didn't see it, I take your word for it, right? So obviously you should be telling the truth, and the truth should align with what you're supposed to show. But the goal is that we are not experts on your system. Maybe that is supposed to be 6 characters or 10, or it doesn't really even matter, because single sign-on kicks in. The customer never sees the ability to enter a password. Maybe it's a PIN, maybe it's something else, right? So sometimes we can misinterpret settings because we're looking at the wrong thing, right? So having that rehearsal beforehand is the key. Okay, so here is the summary before we get into some questions that I've been trying to answer. So here's a summary. So right now the rule got published. You have 60 days before it goes into effect for phase 1, right? So phase 1 does not mean level 1. Do not assume that. The program manager, the contracting officer, they will dictate what level your contract needs to be. And we don't really know which contracts are going to be impacted. Most likely critical Golden Dome type projects, any national security projects, they're going to be impacted. Manpower type contracts, if I was to make a guess, they might deprioritize that, but I don't know. It could be type of manpower, right? So again, just because the DoD is saying about 1,000 entities or 1,100, they always underestimate. I think somebody brought up about their estimation skills, right? So they will they typically underestimate grossly. So I would prepare for an impact immediately, because 60 days will go very quick. And then of course, when you're in the audit process, don't derail. We just have to get through the process together, and we have to answer, like I said, 300 questions. um, we have to answer quite a bit of questions. The other thing that's very important is know how to push back an unreasonable auditor, right? Things are getting pretty difficult. I've been through a lot of what they call ATOs and classified audits, and we don't believe the intent of CMMC was anything near that, right? So if you get an auditor that is adding in more things like 853 items because that's what they're familiar with, you need to understand how to gently push back through that cycle that I demonstrated. And it's your goal to control your stress as well as be very organized. I can't mention that enough. Don't let your nerves get to you. An audit is a little bit stressful, but don't let it control you. I've seen a lot of organizations; they're just under so much stress, and most of the time they come out okay. It's just controlling your stresses is very, very important. Okay, so let's get to the questions. Okay, so we do offer an audit defense course. We're of course auditors, but if you're like, hey, I really need a little bit more advanced training on how to reduce fatigue and get through it, just let us know and we'll walk through it. All right, so I'm going to see if I can actually stop sharing and go into some of the questions that we received. Oh wow, we received quite a bit. All right. Megan, are we still okay with time and questions?
Yeah, we can take a few. The webinar was scheduled for 45 minutes, but I think we should take at least 10 minutes worth of questions. And so if people have questions, then they can stick around, and maybe you'll learn some things from other people's questions.
Okay, awesome. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. So Megan and Brittany, thank you for getting all these on a single area. So like Megan said, if we don't get to these, we will respond to everybody. Like we'll do a short little recording and send these out. And then and then we can go from there. So I'll pick out some of the easy ones that I know, and then I'll jump around a little bit. Okay, so can you explain more about ESPs, how they can impact the assessment? So ESPs, think of that as a fancy word or a new term that the DoD has defined for third parties, external service providers, right? It could be any kind of third party. It could be somebody who's doing background checks for you, a consultant, an audit team, right? But the main ones that they are really paying attention to are your cloud service providers, your CSPs. If those CSPs are processing covered defense information, which is a subcategory of CUI, what starts to happen is you need to request a body of evidence from them, which is the FedRAMP body of evidence, right? If they're not processing CUI, you can request a responsibility matrix saying, hey, I'm doing this according to the controls. Which part of the controls are you doing, right? And that's very important to have your ESPs, your third parties, describe the work division and the share of the work that they're doing when it comes to security. Okay, the second question is phase one rollout. Will it only require self-assessment? Can you clarify this? So again, phase one does not mean level one of CMMC, right? Those are two different things. Phase one rollout, only thing the DoD is really saying is there's going to be less companies that they're going to push this to versus more. Like the full implementation is expected to be in 3 to 4 years, right? So they're estimating about 1,100 companies in phase one, but we don't know which 1,100 companies they're going to select. If you're working on a critical project, you're going to be part of the phase one rollout, right? If you're not a part of a critical project, you may not be, but it does not mean self-assessment only, right? And the self-assessment can happen on level one or level two. It could really mean you need to get a 3PAO or a C3PAO to help you. Okay, I'm going to skip over this because I'll come back to this. Actually, I'll just answer it while I'm highlighting it. So a C3PAO and FedRAMP are two different, so CMMC and FedRAMP, two different protocols and two different types of assessors. We do both the CMMC and then we also do the FedRAMP audits. So a C3PAO typically will not assess for the entire FedRAMP equivalency because it specifically calls out you need to have a FedRAMP auditor. However, what they will do is check for completion to make sure that each and every element of that body of evidence, there's a body of evidence checklist, is at least submitted from your cloud service provider, right? And if you are missing any of those elements from the body of evidence, the C3PAO can simply say, I don't have everything that I need, right? They have the right to say that because that body of evidence is very prescriptive. It's been pushed down by DIBCAC. It's also been pushed by DoD. So they have the right to ask, hey, where is your body of evidence? They can check for completion, but they're not going to reassess. They're not going to make an assertion because they are not FedRAMP auditors themselves. They are a CMMC auditor. So it's very important to understand that because we have had a couple of customers where the C3PAO started to assess based on the FedRAMP protocol, and they are not a FedRAMP auditor. So again, just understanding the rules are very important to push back an unreasonable or an unruly auditor. Okay. Okay, so will the requirement float into future contracts appearing on older basic order agreements or blanket purchase agreements, right? So that terminology, blanket purchase agreements and ordering agreements, is not called out inside of the actual legislation. However, the DoD is using a lot of synonyms like contract orders, work orders, task orders, all of that, right? So in the older ones, I don't know. I don't think so. But in anything new, any type of new blanket purchasing agreement, it will, right? And also exercising of brand new option years. The thing to know here is that if they really want to, they can say, hey, DIBCAC, can you do a DIBCAC assessment because it's post-award? This company has already received an award, and can you do an assessment if they really want to push for assurance, right? So yeah, like, letter of the law, they might say, well, you've already got contracts, hundreds of them, and there's a lot of companies like that. They're not going to retroactively start to fit those in, but they'll add them into their next purchasing agreement. But if it's a critical project, they can work with the DIBCAC and say, hey, can you leverage the current contract to make sure they comply with the regular DFARS, right, which extends you into that. So that's just something to be aware of. This is how I understand it to be currently, right? Okay. All right. Okay. So this is a great question. And it says if your prime is required at level 3, so let's say, a large company, they're doing level 3 work, can they flow down only level 2 to subs more in line with what the subcontractors will be handling? This is quite a bit. This is a gray area. I will say untested territory and also untested theory. Some believe that only the government, the contracting officer, has the right to say this program, this contract, all shall be level 3, right? Um, some believe that they can downgrade information and send you only CUI, right? Level 3 might be CUI type of Rel 2 US only, like only US citizens, and it's got a whole bunch of other caveats. And what this question is asking, does the prime have the ability to declassify information, right? Or classify it at a lower level so that level 2 sub can only do CUI type of information? I typically have not seen this. What will be a good question to ask of the prime to work with the government is establish what's called a SCG, a security classification guide. So you're not left to guess on what is actually CUI, what is not CUI, right? If you feel like your prime has a level 3 contract and you want a level 2 contract, you want to push for that security classification guide, and that is what allows them to break away from CUI of one type to CUI of another type, right? I just actually saw a job posting in the CDAO office by the DoD. They're actually hiring a security classification professional for AI because AI is having the same type of challenge. We're shoving all this data in there. How do we properly classify it and whatnot? So great question. All right, so okay, so we will do a couple more questions and then we will definitely end this. Okay, so this is a good one because this is important, right? How scrutinized is that MSP that you provide that provides you your services? Do our MSP need to be CMMC certified so they can better handle the audit requirements? So first, this MSP is known as the enterprise services provider or an external services provider, ESP, right? If that ESP has a typical MSP and an MSP, they will have access to a lot of critical stuff, right? They'll have admin logins to everything. They're able to launch different systems. They're able to control the endpoints, right? Regardless of what terminology we attach to that provider, you need to understand what is it that they're doing. You need to establish a shared responsibility matrix, tie that to your contracts. And if they are handling CUI, they have access to CUI, it is best for them to get certified, right? Most of these MSPs and MSSPs are getting certified so they can clarify and also understand that you can't outsource the work to, let's say, a foreign entity, right? Like there's rules around that, especially if you have ITAR data, things like that. So yes, the short answer is yes, but being certified is not the only requirement. You still need to make sure that they are not outsourcing the work. There's an actual body of evidence. There's a responsibility matrix. There's all these things that are in place, not just a simple certificate, right? Okay, we will do one more question, and then I think, yes, Ash, quickly, Ignite is an audit firm. Yes, we perform lots of audits. We'll definitely share this. Okay, this is good. This is good. How stale is too stale for an auditor in regards of evidence and timeframes? So, let's be honest, this is a point in time inspection. Typically, we're looking at a window of 30 to 60 days, right? If evidence goes beyond that, then we kind of consider it too stale. there's no firm guidance on this, by the way. So we have to be within a reason, right? 2 months out of the year is a good swing. 3 months, we're stretching it, right? A whole quarter, it can be questionable, right? But the DoD doesn't really have that defined. So the way we define it, it can take us maximum of 1 to 2 weeks to do an actual audit. And so obviously you can have 2 weeks, but then it takes about 3 to 4 weeks to do prep work, discovery, scoping, things like that. And then we're taking another 2 to 3 weeks for deficiency cleanup or reporting into EMAS. So that gives us about a 60-day comfortable window to say, the evidence should be sufficient for a 60-day window. So I just want to thank everyone for giving me your time. I know there are lots of other questions. We are going to we're going to actually publish a lot of these out, and then Meg, you want to cover kind of the next steps?
Yeah, so thank you all for joining. This has been a great session, and I really appreciate all the audience participation. We're going to answer some of those other questions in our thank you emails. If we didn't have time to get to your questions, I'm so sorry. We just had a limited amount of time. After this, we will be sending out an email as well as a link to the recording and the slides. So thank you so much.